Well, I did it because I said I would. This is the tube radio that I converted into the guitar amp, and it wound up working for a day. And then it stopped working, so I had to identify what tubes were bad. And then I went down the rabbit hole of testing the tubes. I had to refurbish the tube tester. I built the test harness, or the universal gain stage over here, and I tested individual tubes to find out what the values needed to be for the plate cathode, if it had one, and for the grid leak and all of that. Basically tweak the circuit one tube at a time to maximize the kind of volume and the gain that I could get. I even got some new old stock tubes off of eBay. In particular, this is a 6CB6, a 3CY5, and another 3S4. This is the one that was so badly microphonic in the original amplifier that I essentially couldn't use it, even though it tested really good on the tube tester. So anyway, I built up the amp again using those three tubes. And a curious thing about the CB6 and the CY5, kind of an oddball tube, but they both had the same pinout, and they used the same heater filament voltage. So I could set up the universal gain stage one time, and I actually had about 4 or 5 different tubes that I could test, all with the exact same settings on the test harness. So I was able to pick out the nicest ones out of those and rebuild this circuit here, actually copying the settings from the test harness and building it into the amplifier here. The cost of this entire project hasn't been that much for the amplifier itself. In fact, there's only about $25 in parts, including the original radio and all of the stuff that I had to add to it to turn it into the guitar amplifier. Now, everything else that I wound up having to get, the tube tester and building the test harness, all of the bits and bobs that went into making that was well over $100. So it was an expensive project, even though the final cost of the amplifier wasn't that much. So the moral of the story is, for me, this was a great educational experience. And it also allowed me to revive a piece of old classic equipment. But it just isn't that great sounding of an amp. I can get more volume and a better sound from a 9-volt battery and less than $1 in transistorized kind of parts. It's a little upsetting as a guitarist because tubes have a cool factor to them, but it's not the biggest bang for the buck, and that's a little depressing because there's a lot of thought and a lot of time that goes into building a tube amp correctly. Not that I built this one correctly. This was largely an experiment to see if I could get it working, and I did. So that leads me to, what is the science of loud? What makes a speaker move the most? How can I get the most amplification from the least amount of parts? That's the thing that I'm really going to walk away from this project with, is this curiosity of, how do I get the most sound? How do I get the most value out of that? Anyway, what is the science of loud? Let me know your thoughts. Give me some suggestions. What do you recommend? Anyway, if you're into this kind of stuff and experimental amplifier building, I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you next time. See ya.